South Korea on a mission to reassure the U.S. that it remains committed to its side of a trade deal with Washington after President Donald Trump threatened to hike tariffs over what he saw as failure to act. Mr. Trump warning he could raise tariffs from 15% to 25%, targeting key exports like cars and pharmaceuticals. The threat delivered on Mr. Trump's social media platform does not amount to actual imposition, so it's unclear when any hike might actually take effect. The trade deal signed in July saw Washington agree to cap tariffs at 15% in exchange for Seoul investing $350 billion in America. The agreement has already been submitted to South Korea's National Assembly and is under review. The ruling Democratic Party says it's looking to speed up the process and will push for deliberation to start next month. The presidential office adds it was not informed about the tariff hike in advance. Seoul's trade envoy says he will head soon to Washington for talks. After China, the U.S. provides the second largest market for South Korea's exports. More than 17% of outbound shipments headed for the states last year, worth nearly $123 billion. With automobiles at $30 billion, the biggest proportion, a quarter of exports. Top automakers Hyundai Motor and Kia saw quarterly operating profit drop about $1.4 billion when Washington imposed a 25% tariff in April last year. A subsequent deal in November cut that to 15%, in line with rivals in Japan and Europe. Analysts warn a return to 25% tariffs will slash operating profits for this year by up to 23%, and more crucially, leave South Korean autos less competitive. The two other sectors singled out by Mr. Trump make up a much smaller fraction. Pharmaceuticals stood at $9.6 billion in 2024. That accounts for just 1.4% of all exports. While still 16% of those were shipped to the United States, that is the biggest market. The U.S. was also the top destination for lumber products from South Korea, although they make up just $22 million of last year's exports. Reporting for CNN, Nick Harper joins us live from Washington, D.C. Nick, what impact could a hike of up to 25% have on economic and strategic ties between U.S. and South Korea?
Well, Wei, so as you detailed there, the two countries are inextricably linked. There is a huge trading relationship between the two of them. They are allies, not just from an economic perspective, but also a security perspective as well. And yet what we've seen from Donald Trump's post on social media has had South Korea scrambling to try and get out in front of this to ensure that tariffs do not get hiked even further. Donald Trump posting on social media the potential of raising tariffs from 15% to 25%. As you mentioned, it could impact South Korean cars, lumber, pharmaceutical, electronics, all of those heading to the United States would have that increased tariff. It's not clear exactly when that would come in, but really this seems to be all part of Donald Trump's plan to try and pressure South Korea to get moving, because he seems to be suggesting that they have been dragging their feet. In that post, he said that South Korea was not living up to its deal with the United States. And of course, back in July, in principle, the two countries agreed $350 billion of South Korean money would be invested here in the United States. It's not really clear why this might be happening now. Some suggestions it might be part of a regulatory action that's taking place in South Korea against a US e-commerce company, Coupang, perhaps the US president trying to get looser restrictions in South Korea for US companies. But bear in mind that the bills are heading through Parliament at the moment. They are now saying they might be able to fast track it in February, the president putting on pressure.
All right, Nick, it bears mention that this was just announced on Mr. Trump's social media platform. It is not, in fact, imposed. Whether it has any legal weight is also uncertain at this point. And Mr. Trump has form in terms of threatening and then walking back threats on tariffs. How much of this is really about trade?
Well, that's it. I mean, so much of what Donald Trump likes to do, his tactic, is that pressure that he likes to put on other countries to push them to push them as much as possible to do what he wants as quickly as possible. So he'll launch these threats without necessarily launching the action itself, and then has that ability to walk back the threat if he feels the other country is doing what he wants them to do. I think it's interesting to note that so far, about 3.5 weeks into January, we've seen the US president push hard on his expansionism plans in Venezuela, in Greenland, but he's also now mixing in trade policy as well. Remember, he threatened 8 European allies over Greenland if he didn't get what he wanted, and then pulled back on that. He threatened 100% tariffs on Canada if it makes a trade deal with China. And here we have the US president once again mixing foreign policy with trade policy, trying to get what he wants around the world by using this economic leverage. He's hoping that this might work, or at least get South Korea to speed up the passage of those bills through Parliament.
Oh, thanks. Nick Harper there reporting for CNA from Washington, D.C.